Well, since I last broadcast the programme, and as I've said in previous shows, one of the main reasons for that is just the sheer lack of anything interesting happening in the political arena in Scotland. But today was a bit different because for the first time in months, we're starting to see something different appearing on our news feeds, and not only online, but also in the mainstream British Nationalist controlled media. What I'm talking about here today is an item that has appeared, I think, of news of, in many different areas of the media today, and that is that Police Scotland, who are conducting, I think it's safe to say, a marathon investigation into the former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, that they have actually come out and said that they want to pause the investigation while they seek legal advice. Now, this is a very interesting development because for those of us, and there must be many of us, who suspected that this entire police investigation had been cobbled together, including its blue tents, just in order to discredit the First Minister, might well have been right, because it looks as though the police are now worrying about the legality of what they're actually doing. I don't know how many months it has been since Nicola Sturgeon and Peter Murrell were investigated, or the investigation into their activities whilst they were in charge of the SNP. I don't know basically how long it's lasted, but it feels like at least a couple of years. Now, if you remember that Police Scotland works on a fixed budget every year, the amount of resources, manpower, womanpower, and I think the amount of digging they're going to have to do, both electronically and by monitoring all sorts of communications, is taking up a huge amount of their resources, and that must be costing them money. But when the police actually stop doing an investigation because they're not sure whether it's legal or not, I think we can take that as a sign, a confirmation, if you like, that this entire operation was cobbled together and the police have been forced to carry it on regardless for month after month after month, without, so far at least, showing any tangible evidence against the First Minister to convict her of anything. And they've been looking for details about what she could be accused of or suspected of doing. And that tells you that they really don't know. Because if they did know what they were trying to investigate, then they wouldn't need to ask for legal advice, and they wouldn't be worried about whether what they were doing was legal or not. And I think it's worth remembering that when Alex Salmond was taken to trial, and ironically involving the First Minister Nicola Sturgeon at the time in that investigation, when he was taken to court and investigated and eventually had his trial and was exonerated, he went on to sue the state. He went on to sue the Scottish Government, and I think by extension that would extend to Police Scotland as well, who were forced to investigate then. There is a good chance that if this is all just smoke and mirrors, if this is just a method of trying to discredit any First Minister who has, shall we say, threatened the integrity of the precious Union, then it's obviously intended as a warning to political leaders in Scotland not to step out of line, not to threaten the integrity, that's just the word I really hate when it comes to the United Kingdom, but the actual integrity and the security of the United Kingdom. So I think, just for the first time in months, we're finally beginning to see the cracks appearing in Police Scotland. They're beginning to doubt whether or not what they're doing is actually legal or not. And the fact that they're having to seek legal advice means they must be worried. And secondarily, they must be even more worried about the amount of money they're basically burning through investigating something for which there appears to be very little, if any, evidence of criminality. Now, you'll notice also that the case against Mr. Murrell hasn't been in the news recently. It seemed to have stalled. There's not been any announcements at the moment of a trial date. The case, I think, was planned to be put before the Procurator Fiscal Service, which is Scotland's highest judicial body, in conjunction with the Crown Office, which is, of course, the British state's overseeing power of the Scottish judiciary. And yet, still nothing much has happened to Mr. Murrell. But now that Nicola Sturgeon's investigation has effectively come to a screeching halt while the police try to find out whether what they're doing is actually legal or not, and Is it worth all the money that they're blowing on it? Just for what? Really not very much so far. Well, we'll have to wait and see. But I think if this unravels much further, I'll be fascinated to see what the Crown Office and the Procurator Fiscal Service has to say about this. My guess is that they'll move the goalposts. They'll shift the investigation onto some other subsidiary set of accusations about particular details which may be insignificant, so that the investigation drags on and on for as long as possible until they're eventually forced to end it, simply because they've wasted so many hundreds of millions of pounds of our tax money on basically humiliating a former First Minister in order to send a political warning to John Swinney. Now, I mention Mr. Swinney in this particularly because many of us have been very baffled by the fact that although Mr. Swinney is viewed as a very competent leader of a government, in other words, he's perhaps ideally equipped to manage the Scottish economy, to manage the day-to-day running of the country, he has made very little, if any, mention of how he is going to campaign for independence. He says he's going to, he says he supports it, the party says it supports it, and yet there is no plan. Could it be that this entire fiasco involving the blue tents was simply intended as a shot across the bows of any Scottish political leader who dared to stick their head over the parapet and say, we want to leave the Union, and here is a method that we can do it, which will be democratic and will give the people of Scotland back their right to self-determination, which incidentally we have never lost. And as you know, I've been championing for a long time the cause of Salvo, which is currently, which has now currently concluded its legal activities. Its King's Counsel, its senior legal figure, has now given his legal opinion and all of the documents drawn up to support Scotland's claim at the international courts to have its self-determination not only recognised, but to force the British government to allow the people of Scotland to exercise it, is now imminent, because that package is now complete, and there will be a date eventually at which our Scottish KC is going to present Scotland's historical documents, which prove that we have always had the right to self-determination. We have not used it. We certainly didn't use it in 1707 because there was no democratic event to back that up. I would say that the referendum in 2014 could be claimed by the United Kingdom to have been us exercising a right to self-determination then. But remember that that referendum was run by the United Kingdom. It was entirely controlled by the United Kingdom, and all the rules that were set before the referendum were broken by the United Kingdom. So it doesn't represent a lawful action by the people of Scotland to decide the future of the country. So to my mind, we are still wide open. We still have the right to self-determination, but I don't think our leaders, political leaders like John Swinney, are going to be able to do it because they have been so heavily threatened, and they've seen what happened when their own colleagues and friends have tried to gain independence by political and democratic and legal means. They are pilloried in public for years, pestered by the media, hounded by the media, basically stalked by every British hack that there is in Scotland at the moment, because they dared to say that Scotland has the right to self-determination, and we should be allowed another chance to say whether this union should continue or not. Anyway, that's it from me today. A single issue programme. I don't often do these, but I think this one was worthwhile. I hope you found this interesting, and as usual, if you have, please subscribe to the channel, and if you can afford to do so, please make a donation using one of the PayPal donation links to Partick Driver, that's me, and that is how I fund my activities in Inde-Car, which incidentally are getting more and more difficult to do because of price rises that I'm faced to absorb in my business, which is making it more and more expensive for me to take time out to do programs like this. But anyway, I'll keep going as long as I'm needed, and I hope you'll stick with me in the long run. In the meantime, as I always say, keep the faith. Remember, we're not going to win if we give up. And I'll see you soon. Bye for now.